Most men do not think, they react. Most men do not lose because they are stupid. They lose because their mind is unguarded. They wake up already invaded. Their attention belongs to a screen before it belongs to their mission. Their emotions belong to other people before they belong to their own command. Their time belongs to noise, pressure, habit, memory, fear, comparison, and the cheap little emergencies that make a man feel busy while keeping him powerless. And then they call that life. Machiavelli would not have called it life. He would have called it exposure, because a man whose mind can be entered by anything can eventually be controlled by anything. One notification changes his mood. One insult changes his behavior. One rejection changes his identity. One moment of comfort changes his discipline. One person's opinion changes the way he sees himself. That is not freedom. That is a nervous system pretending to be a man. Look closely, and you will see it everywhere. A man says he is focused, but his attention is stolen 10 times before noon. He says he is disciplined, but his body negotiates every morning with the bed. He says he does not care what people think, but one small disrespect ruins his whole day. He says he wants power, but he still gives the world permission to decide what state of mind he lives in. This is the first truth. Your mind is either trained by you or trained by the world. There is no empty mind. There is no neutral mind. Every day, something is shaping your thoughts, your reactions, your standards, your fears, and your appetite for difficulty. If you do not choose the training, the world chooses it for you. And the world does not train men for greatness. It trains them for consumption. It trains them to react quickly, think shallowly, crave approval, avoid silence, fear boredom, and mistake stimulation for progress. It gives them outrage so they feel alive. It gives them comfort so they stay soft. It gives them comparison so they feel behind. It gives them entertainment so they never have to sit alone with the brutal question that could change everything. Who would you become if your mind finally obeyed you? That question is dangerous because it removes the excuse that life is simply happening to you. Most men do not want to hear this. They want to believe their problem is lack of opportunity, lack of support, lack of luck, lack of timing. Sometimes those things are real, but even when they are real, they are not the deepest layer. The deepest layer is this. Many men are trying to win with a mind that has been trained to surrender. They surrender to impulse. They surrender to comfort. They surrender to the need to be liked. They surrender to anger because anger feels stronger than discipline. They surrender to overthinking because overthinking feels safer than action. They surrender to distraction because distraction protects them from seeing how much time they have already wasted. That is why the mind must become a weapon, not a weapon of cruelty, a weapon of command, a weapon that cuts through illusion, a weapon that does not panic under pressure, a weapon that can pause before reacting, observe before speaking, endure before quitting, and act before the perfect feeling arrives. The weak mind reacts and calls it honesty. The trained mind pauses and calls it strategy. That pause is where power begins. In the pause between insult and response, a man discovers whether his ego owns him. In the pause between desire and action, he discovers whether comfort owns him. In the pause between fear and retreat, he discovers whether his future is stronger than his old programming. Most men never build that pause. They are proud of being real, but what they call real is often just untrained reaction. They say, "This is who I am," when what they really mean is, "This is the trigger I never mastered." That line will offend some men. Good. A useful truth is supposed to disturb the part of you that has been living too comfortably. Machiavelli understood that the world does not reward the man who merely feels deeply. It rewards the man who sees clearly, moves deliberately, and understands what others are too emotional to notice. The first battlefield is not outside you. It is the mental space before you obey a feeling. And this is where ordinary men are defeated long before the world ever sees it. They lose in private. They lose in the morning. They lose in the moment they choose, scrolling over focus. They lose when they let one criticism change their self-respect. They lose when they tell their plans to people who have not earned access to their future. They lose when they call comfort balance, because they are afraid to admit they have become soft. No enemy has to destroy a man who is already disorganized inside. They only have to wait. This is why turning your mind into a weapon is not about becoming louder. It is about becoming harder to access, harder to distract, harder to provoke, harder to read, harder to discourage, harder to pull back into the version of yourself that keeps repeating the same failures with different explanations. You do not need a new personality. You need internal command. The man who has internal command does not need every room to validate him. He does not reveal every thought. He does not respond to every bait. He does not confuse emotional intensity with strength. He knows the world is always studying him, even when it pretends not to. So he studies himself first. Where am I easy? Where do I leak power? Where do I need approval? Where do I mistake reaction for truth? Where does comfort still negotiate with my future? These are not soft questions. These are questions that sharpen the blade. Because once a man sees where he is easy to control, he has found the exact place where training must begin. That is the first step. Before you outsmart anyone, outsmart your own impulses. Before you outwork anyone, outwork your own excuses. Before you outlast anyone, outlast the weaker self that keeps asking for permission to remain unchanged. Your mind is not a weapon because you want it to be. It becomes a weapon when it stops belonging to chaos. The man who sees the game stops being used by it. To outsmart people, you must stop believing the surface. The surface is where weak minds live. They listen only to words. They trust quick smiles. They accept easy apologies. They mistake politeness for loyalty, confidence for competence, attention for respect, and agreement for alignment. Then they are shocked when people reveal themselves. But people usually reveal themselves long before the final betrayal. They reveal themselves in patterns: how they act when you say no, how they speak when you are not useful, how they respond when you win, how they behave when your boundaries inconvenience them, how quickly their kindness disappears when they no longer get access to what they wanted from you. Most men miss this because they want comfort more than truth. They do not want to see hidden motives. They want to believe people are exactly what they claim to be. They want to believe fairness controls the room. They want to believe effort alone will be noticed. They want to believe being good protects them from being used. Machiavelli would call that innocence expensive. The world is not governed by what people say they value. It is governed by incentives, fear, ego, desire, status, survival, and self-interest wrapped in acceptable language. That does not mean everyone is evil. It means everyone is human. And human nature is never as clean as public speech. A man may love justice until justice costs him advantage. He may praise honesty until honesty exposes him. He may respect loyalty until a better opportunity appears. He may support your growth until your growth makes him feel smaller. This is not cynicism. It is perception. The trained mind does not become paranoid. It becomes accurate. Accuracy is the beginning of strategy. When you enter a room, do not only ask, "What do I want to say?" Ask, "What does this room reward?" Ask, "Who needs approval?" Ask, "Who is afraid of losing position?" Ask, "Who is silent because they are weak?" And who is silent because they are watching? Most people walk into rooms trying to be liked. The strategic man walks in trying to understand. That difference changes everything, because the man who needs to be liked becomes easy to guide. Give him praise, and he opens. Give him criticism, and he defends. Give him silence, and he becomes anxious. Give him attention, and he starts performing. He thinks he is building connection. Often, he is giving away leverage. Information is currency, and most men spend it like fools. They reveal their plans too early. They explain their fears to people who will later use them. They announce ambition before they have built the strength to protect it. They tell everyone what they are becoming, then wonder why resistance appears before their foundation is ready. A weaponized mind does not move like that. It lets people see results, not the machine. It lets them see confidence, not the cost. It lets them see direction, not every internal doubt. This is not about being fake. It is about understanding that access must be earned. The weak man confuses openness with strength. The trained man understands that unearned access is vulnerability. That sentence alone can divide people. Some will call it cold. Others will recognize how many times their life became harder because they spoke too freely to the wrong person. The man who outsmarts others first learns restraint. He does not react to every question. Not every question deserves an answer. Some questions are not asked to understand you. They are asked to locate your weakness. Some people do not ask about your plans because they believe in you. They ask because knowing your direction helps them measure whether they should support you, compete with you, or quietly discourage you. This is why silence is not emptiness. Silence can be strategy, but only when it is chosen. There is a false version of silence that comes from fear. A man stays silent because he is afraid to be judged, afraid to be rejected, afraid to reveal what he wants. That is not power. That is hiding. True silence is different. True silence comes from command. It says, I do not need to expose what is still being built. It says, I do not need to answer before I have observed. It says, I do not need to make my inner world available to people who have not proven they can handle it. That kind of silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty can create respect. Because when people cannot fully read you, they cannot easily predict you. When they cannot predict you, they cannot easily position against you. When they cannot position against you, they become more careful. This is not domination for its own sake. It is protection of your direction. A man with a real mission cannot afford to be emotionally available to every passing opinion. He must know what to absorb and what to reject. He must know who sharpens him and who only stimulates his old wounds. He must know when conversation is useful and when it is only a hidden attempt to pull him back into a familiar weakness. The deeper truth is this: most men are not defeated by stronger enemies. They are defeated by people who understand their triggers better than they do. A woman knows praise makes him compliant. A friend knows guilt makes him available. A boss knows fear makes him overwork without leverage. A rival knows disrespect makes him reckless. A crowd knows attention makes him perform. And because he never studied himself, he calls this life. No, it is poor self-intelligence. Outsmarting begins with self-surveillance. You study your own reactions like a strategist studies an enemy border, not with hatred, with precision. You find where anger makes you stupid, where loneliness makes you cheap, where praise makes you careless, where boredom makes you undisciplined, where rejection makes you chase people who do not deserve pursuit. Then you remove the handle, because if they cannot grab it, they cannot steer you with it. That is how perception becomes power. You stop being controlled by what appears. You start reading what operates beneath it. And once you see the game, you stop begging the game to be fair. You learn to play it with cleaner eyes. Discipline is the war no one sees. A sharp mind without discipline is only decoration. It may sound intelligent. It may understand strategy. It may talk about power, perception, psychology, and human nature. But if it cannot command the body when comfort appears, it is not dangerous. It is theoretical. And the world is full of theoretical men. Men who know what to do but do not do it. Men who can explain discipline while living in delay. Men who can describe greatness while protecting the habits that keep them average. Men who collect insights like trophies but never convert them into evidence. Machiavelli would not respect that, because strategy without execution is fiction. The real war is not cinematic. It is not dramatic. It does not look powerful from the outside. It looks like waking up when no one cares. It looks like choosing the hard task before the easy distraction. It looks like training when the body complains. It looks like working in silence while other men are performing ambition online. This is the war before the world wakes up, and most men lose it quietly. They lose because comfort speaks in a reasonable voice. It does not say, destroy your future. It says, you deserve a break. It says, start tomorrow. It says, you have time. It says, this one time does not matter. But a man's life is built from this one time. One delay becomes a pattern. One broken promise becomes a lower standard. One avoided discomfort becomes proof that the weaker voice can win negotiations. And over time, the man does not simply lose discipline. He loses trust in himself. That is the hidden damage. When a man repeatedly breaks his word to himself, he stops believing his own future. He may still talk big. He may still dream. He may still imagine a powerful version of himself. But deep down, he knows his words have no weight because he has watched himself abandon them too many times. Self-respect is evidence, not emotion. Evidence. Evidence that you do what you said. Evidence that you keep standards when nobody is watching. Evidence that you can work without applause. Evidence that you can keep moving when the reward is delayed. Evidence that your mood no longer holds veto power over your mission. That is why discipline is not just productivity. Discipline is identity repair. It repairs the relationship between your word and your action. And once that relationship becomes strong, something changes in your presence. You stop needing to convince people you are serious. Seriousness becomes visible in the way you move, the way you speak, the way you decline distractions, the way you do not negotiate with every weak feeling that rises inside you. This is where outworking begins. not by doing more random things, by doing the right things with enough consistency that your future has no choice but to change shape. Most men misunderstand work. They think working hard means exhaustion. Sometimes it does. But real work is not just effort. It is repeated pressure applied in the right direction. A scattered man can be exhausted and still be weak. A disciplined man becomes stronger because his effort compounds. That word matters. Compounds. Every focused hour trains the mind to stay longer. Every difficult repetition trains the body to obey. Every controlled reaction trains the ego to lose authority. Every private victory becomes a deposit into the identity of a man who can be trusted under pressure. And pressure is where the truth appears. Anyone can look disciplined when life is easy. Anyone can feel powerful after a good day. Anyone can speak about mental toughness when the room is warm, the money is stable, and the future feels generous. But what happens when nothing is working? What happens when you are tired, unseen, underpaid, doubted, delayed, and still expected to perform? That is where the average man starts bargaining. He lowers the standard and calls it being realistic. He quits and calls it protecting peace. He loses focus and calls it needing balance. He avoids the hard conversation and calls it maturity. Sometimes those words are true. Often, they are beautiful disguises for surrender. This is why a man must be careful with the stories he uses to explain his weakness. The mind is clever. It can make almost any retreat sound wise if the ego needs protection. That is why discipline must be built before the crisis. You do not build command in the moment everything is falling apart. You reveal the command you already trained. You do not become calm under pressure by accident. You become calm because you have practiced denying panic the right to lead. This is the Stoic edge. But Machiavelli adds another layer. Endurance alone is not enough. You must endure with strategy. It is not enough to suffer. Many men suffer and learn nothing. They walk through fire and come out bitter, not sharper. They mistake pain for wisdom, when pain without reflection often becomes only resentment. The trained mind extracts lessons. If a plan fails, it studies the assumption. If a person betrays, it studies the signs it ignored. If fear returns, it studies the preparation that was missing. If boredom defeats discipline, it studies the environment that made weakness too easy. Nothing is wasted when the mind is trained. Even failure becomes material. That is how the weapon is forged. Not through comfort, through controlled difficulty. The man who chooses difficulty before difficulty chooses him becomes harder to surprise. He has already met parts of pain in private. He has already practiced discomfort. He has already learned that the body can complain without being obeyed, and the mind can doubt without being trusted. This is why the invisible work matters. The world only sees the strike. It does not see the sharpening. It does not see the years of ordinary choices. The early mornings, the private restraint, the lonely standards, the refusal to explain, the repetition that looked boring until it became undeniable. Then one day, people call it luck. Let them. A man who needs everyone to understand the process is still too hungry for applause. Build anyway. Sharpen anyway. Outwork them in places they will never see until the result says what your mouth no longer needs to. The brain protects the cage before it protects the crown. Here is the deeper layer most men never reach. Your brain is not naturally designed to make you great. It is designed to keep you safe, and those are not the same thing. Safety loves the familiar. Greatness requires uncertainty. Safety wants comfort. Growth requires controlled pain. Safety wants approval from the group. Power often requires moving alone before anyone understands you. This is why transformation feels like a war inside your skull. One part of you wants more. Another part wants the familiar cage. One part wants respect. Another part fears the cost of maintaining a higher standard. One part wants discipline. Another part wants relief. One part wants to become dangerous. Another part still wants permission to stay soft. The old self does not die quietly. It argues. It uses your own voice. It says, be realistic. It says, you are tired. It says, you can start later. It says, you are not ready. It says, this is not the right time. It says, you need more clarity before you move. Sometimes clarity comes before action, but often, clarity is produced by action. The untrained mind waits to feel ready. The trained mind moves because readiness is built through movement. This is why so many men live trapped between potential and execution. They are smart enough to see what they could become, but not disciplined enough to pay the cost. So they live in psychological tension. They know they are capable of more, but their daily behavior keeps proving they are still loyal to less. That tension becomes painful. So they numb it. They scroll. They drink. They chase attention. They overthink. They start a new plan instead of finishing the old one. They talk about what they will do, so they can feel temporary relief from not doing it. This is one of the cruelest traps. Talking about ambition can become a substitute for acting on it. The brain receives emotional reward from the identity before the sacrifice has been paid. People admire the plan. You feel seen. You feel serious. You feel like movement has begun. But nothing has moved. Only your image moved. That is why silence protects the work. Not because secrecy is magic, because silence prevents premature reward. When no one knows what you are building, you cannot feed on applause. When no one claps for your intention, you must rely on the deeper fuel of standard. When no one validates the mission, you discover whether the mission is real. Most men do not want that test. They want witnesses before work. But the weaponized mind does not need witnesses. It needs pressure. Pressure reveals whether your desire is real or decorative. And this is where focus becomes sacred. Focus is not just productivity. Focus is force. It is the narrowing of mental energy toward one chosen direction. A scattered mind cannot cut through reality. It touches many things and masters none. It knows many ideas but owns no result. Look at modern men. Many are not ignorant. They are fragmented. Their attention is broken into pieces by screens, opinions, outrage, comparison, fantasy, and unfinished fear. They are full of information, but empty of command. They know more than their fathers knew, but often do less with it. They consume tactics, philosophies, podcasts, books, and motivation, yet still cannot sit alone with one hard task for 90 uninterrupted minutes. That is not lack of intelligence. That is stolen attention. And stolen attention becomes stolen life. The man who cannot focus cannot build depth. The man who cannot build depth cannot produce mastery. The man who cannot produce mastery becomes replaceable in a world full of noise. This is why absence is power. Absence from cheap stimulation. Absence from people who reward your weakness. Absence from pointless arguments. Absence from environments that keep your nervous system addicted to reaction. Absence from the old version of yourself that needs constant proof it still exists. Sometimes the strongest move is removal. Remove the input that makes you weak. Remove the audience that rewards performance. Remove the habit that keeps making comfort convenient. Remove the conversation where your future keeps shrinking to fit people who do not want you sharper. Machiavelli understood position. In the external world, position decides advantage. In the internal world, position means arranging your life so that your strongest self has the best chance to win. Do not rely only on willpower. Willpower is unstable when the environment is designed against you. Build systems, build rules, build distance, build friction between you and your weaker impulses. A man becomes what he repeatedly allows. Allow noise, and you become scattered. Allow excuses, and you become soft. Allow resentment, and you become bitter. Allow discipline, and you become structured. Allow silence, and you become harder to read. Allow discomfort, and you become harder to break. This is the real programming, not what you say you believe, what you repeat. The brain adapts to repetition. Repeat delay, and delay becomes identity. Repeat focus, and focus becomes easier to enter. Repeat courage, and fear loses some authority. Repeat restraint, and ego becomes less loud. This is why your daily life is not small. It is the factory where your future self is being manufactured. And if you are not careful, you will keep producing the same man you claim you are trying to escape. That is the uncomfortable truth. Many men do not need a new strategy. They need to stop protecting the old identity, because the cage is not always built by enemies. Sometimes the cage is built by the part of you that still thinks safety is worth more than power. Become the man the world cannot easily move. The final test is not whether you can think sharply for one day. It is whether you can remain sharp when life becomes heavy. Anyone can feel dangerous after hearing strong words. Anyone can feel disciplined at midnight. Anyone can imagine a powerful version of himself while the room is quiet and no one is demanding anything from him. But life does not test imagination. It tests ownership. Who owns your mind when pressure arrives? Does fear own it when the future becomes uncertain? Does ego own it when someone disrespects you? Does comfort own it when the work becomes boring? Does approval own it when no one notices your effort? Does pain own it when an old wound starts speaking like truth? A man can look free and still be governed from inside. That is why turning your mind into a weapon is not about becoming emotionless. Emotionless men are not always strong. Sometimes they are only frozen. Sometimes what they call control is just avoidance, wearing armor. Real control is different. Real control means you can feel anger without handing it the steering wheel. You can feel fear without obeying retreat. You can feel desire without becoming cheap. You can feel pain without turning it into identity. You can feel misunderstood without begging the room to see you correctly. That is mastery, not the absence of emotion. Command over expression, because expression is information, and information is leverage. The man who shows every wound teaches the world where to press. The man who reacts to every insult teaches the world what controls him. The man who explains every move teaches the world how to predict him. The man who needs approval teaches the world what price he can be bought for. This is not a call to become fake. It is a call to become governed. Governed by purpose, not impulse. By strategy, not ego. By standards, not moods. This is the final meaning of outsmart, outwork, and outlast. Outsmart them by seeing what they miss. Outwork them by building when they need applause. Outlast them by staying with the mission after emotional reward disappears. Most men disappear there. They do not quit when the dream is exciting. They quit when the dream becomes quiet. They quit when progress slows. They quit when nobody asks how hard it has been. They quit when the work stops feeding their identity and starts demanding their character. That is where the weaponized mind continues. Not because it feels heroic, because it has been trained beyond feeling. It has rules when emotion becomes unreliable. It has standards when motivation leaves. It has a mission that does not collapse every time the mood changes. And this makes the man difficult to move. Not impossible to hurt, difficult to move. There is a difference. A strong man still feels the strike. He still feels disappointment. He still feels betrayal. He still feels the silence after effort goes unnoticed. But he does not let every wound rewrite his direction. He does not let every season become a verdict. He does not let every person who misunderstands him become a judge over his identity. He studies pain, then he uses it. Pain can make a man smaller if he worships it, but pain can make a man sharper if he extracts the lesson. The betrayal teaches perception. The failure teaches structure. The rejection teaches independence. The delay teaches endurance. The silence teaches whether the mission was real. Nothing is wasted when the mind is trained. And that is why the trained man becomes dangerous over time. Not because he is cruel, because he is cumulative. Every experience adds weight. Every failure adds data. Every private discipline adds evidence. Every moment of restraint adds authority. Every season of being unseen adds depth. Eventually, he stops moving like a man begging the world to give him permission. He moves like a man who has already paid privately for the right to trust himself. That kind of man does not need to announce power. People feel the absence of need in him. They feel that he is not easy to flatter, not easy to provoke, not easy to distract, not easy to shame back into his old self, not easy to pull into a pointless emotional game. They may not understand it, but they sense it. That is presence. Presence is what happens when a man's inner world becomes ordered enough that his outer behavior no longer leaks desperation. This is where the title locks. Turn your mind into a weapon, not against innocent people, against confusion, against reaction, against delay, against comfort disguised as wisdom, against the old programming that taught you to be managed by fear, praise, boredom, lust, anger, and approval. Once that weapon is built, do not wave it around. Use it to live with precision. Speak less than your ego wants. Observe more than people expect. Work longer than your mood allows. Endure past the point where most men quietly disappear. Guard your attention like territory. Guard your plans like currency. Guard your standards like the foundation of everything you are becoming. And when the world finally notices, do not rush to explain the process. Let the result speak. The world does not need to see every hour you sharpened the blade. It only needs to feel the edge. Most men will never do this. Not because they cannot, because the price is too uncomfortable. They want the image of power without the isolation of discipline. They want the reward of strategy without the patience of observation. They want the identity of strength without the private confrontation with weakness. And maybe that is why the path works. It stays open because so few men can walk it without applause. So choose carefully. Your mind will be trained either way, by you or by the world. Train it, sharpen it, command it, or spend your life being moved by men who did.